Hi, so before we start with the theoretical concepts, we will be looking at some of the Python syntax and Python data structures that are useful to implement the algorithms in our in practical life. So now I will be sharing the screen. Okay, so first thing that we will start with is list data structure. Okay, so first of all, if you have to define the list, then you use the square brackets, and you can in Python it is very easy to define anything. You just have to put a name of a variable and then just put values inside the variable. Okay, so it is a auto data type detector kind of thing. So to if you have to specify a list, you have to use the square brackets first thing. And the thing about the list is that you can have any data type inside this in these square brackets. Basically one list, it's not like other programming language where the arrays can only have one type of data type. You can have any data type inside a list. It can be integer, it can be float, it can be string, it can be anything. Okay, so you use this syntax. You have the name of the variable and you have the values. Next thing is that if you want to create a list inside a list, then you use this syntax. Basically this is simply you are creating a bigger list and then inside that you have smaller list. This is just this. Okay, if you want to know a data type of any variable, basically if you want to know a data type of any variable in Python, you use this keyword, that is type. You just write type and bracket ke andar you write a variable ka name, and this will give you the data type of that particular variable, or you can say data type of the value that that variable is holding. Okay, next thing we will come to is the indexing. What kind of indexing is used in list? The list in Python uses zero based indexing, and that is indexing which is used in most of the programming languages. So zero based indexing means that the first element is zero, and second is first, and so on, and the last element is actually n minus 1th element, where n is the size of the list. Another type of indexing that we have is a negative indexing. In negative indexing, what happens is it basically refers element from the end to the beginning. Okay, so the last element is -1, then -2, and it goes on till minus of size of the list. Basically on the number of elements is the list. It goes until that. Best thing about indexing is that you can randomly access any element, and random accessing is actually beneficial for our coding problems and coding data structure, because it creates the big of one time complexity for accessing any element. Even if the list has 1 million elements, you can just access any element in big of one time, and it is a very huge benefit of random accessing. So how do you random access? You do random access by just referring to the index. Okay, so you have the name of the list here, and in the square bracket you just write the index. So here you can see the third index is 23, so it will return 23. The -2th index is Mary, so it will return Mary. If you want to fetch a range, then you can do you can specify something like this: start index colon end index. Here one thing that you have to keep in mind is that the first index that you are passing is included, whereas the ending index that you are passing is not included. Okay, so if you want to fetch if you want to fetch values from Sam to 23, then you have to specify something like 0, say 4, because if you want to have 23, you have to give the value, you have to give the index of the next next element. Okay, now if you want to fetch everything from the beginning, till a particular index, then you can just leave the first argument empty, and if you want to fetch everything from an index till the end, then you can just leave the second argument empty. Okay, next thing we will be discussing is manipulation and the working of list. how do you manipulate, how do you perform manipulation in the list? Okay, so this is the list that we have seen in the last section, and this is the indexing that we have used. Now the thing is, if you want to update any value, you just refer to the index, you just refer to that particular index. So for example, employee 4 is having Mary right now, so I just refer to that index, and there I will provide the next value. And this is the syntax to update one value. If you want to update a range, then you can just specify the range and you can pass the values that you want to update. Now there are certain functions also that you can use to update the list. First is append function is what, if you have list of 1 2 3 elements and you want to add a fourth element, then you can use append, and append basically adds one item to the list. Whereas if you want to add number of items, you want to add items more than one, you can use extend keyword. And using the extend keyword, basically you use the normal brackets, the parenthesis, and inside that you specify a new list that you want to append to your existing list, and that's how it's done. There is another function of concatenation. Concatenation is basically a very fancy name. It is just a fancy name for addition, and repetition is the fancy name for multiplication. Okay, so concatenation, what happens is you have a variable odd and you have a list. Okay, so if you want to create another list adding the elements of odd with some other elements, then you can just use this addition keyword, I'll say, or symbol, whatever you can just understand. Whereas in repetition, you can just specify the list and you can do a multiply of it by some number, and you can assign that to a new variable. And if you print that new variable, then you will have the elements, if it is having two elements 0 1, so it will print 0 1 0 1 written 10 times. Okay, so this is what going to happen. Another function we have in list is to delete a particular element or range of element or the entire list. Simply you can just specify the index, or you can specify the range, or you can just specify nothing and delete the entire thing. Now there is something that is very interesting. How do you think that how does lists work internally? So if you have a list, okay, if you create a list like this, and then if you create a list like this, and then you have another variable and you equate it to the list, okay, and then you have hundreds of lines of code, and somewhere in the code, what you do something like you need to update the value of the first element in the list, and you can just write it as Jane. Now if you print x, what do you think? If you print x0, what do you think is going to be the value? The thing is, if you are specifying a new variable like this, then the changes are going to reflect in the x also, because the thing is that if you are using this syntax, then both x and y are going to point to the same memory location, right? If you copy like this, then x and y are going to point to the same memory location. So if you make any changes in y, right, so if changes here make it Jane, then the same changes are reflected also in x. Now how do you copy without having the changes to reflect in the other variable? And for that you need to use the keyword list. Okay, you have to do something like list x, and doing this is what, or you can also do something like this, y is equals to x, and copy all the elements. Basically it is from start to end everything, right? Because we do not have both arguments, and it means everything. And now we have two separate copies. Using these syntaxes, we have two separate copies, two separate copies. And now if we make any changes in the first index, first element of y, it won't be reflected in the first element of x. So that is how we can use it. Now we have a very small section remaining, and that is the iteration. How do you iterate in the list? First thing, we will see this for loop. Okay, first thing we will see this for loop. How does iteration in general works in Python is, suppose you have a list of employees and you do something like for item in employee, and this is employee. Now now what you do, what basically happens is, one by one item is going to point to every value, every element sequentially of that list. Okay, another thing, if I am writing something like range 6, that is going to mean that I am referring to a list of first 6 whole numbers, right? I am referring to the list of first 6 whole number. That is what range 6 means. Okay, all right, so now we will get back. The first way to iterate is using the in keyword. How we can do, using the in keyword basically returns a boolean value, and using in keyword you just check if a certain item is present in the list or not. So if you do something like you have this list, and you do something like print Joe in employee, so the code, the compiler is going to check every element, and if it finds Joe, then it is going to return the boolean value true. Whereas if you put something which is not in the list, it is going to return false. And you can also use the not operator before in to reverse the result of the in operator. Okay, it's as simple as that. Another thing that we have is list comprehension. List comprehension is what? List comprehension is a process of creating a new list from a previously existing list. Okay, so if you are asked to make a list of first and odd numbers, one way you can do is you can manually type everything. Another way you can do is you can use the comprehension. How do you use the comprehension is, first thing you have a loop. Okay, I will make it very easy. First thing, we have a loop, basically a for loop, and that loop points to a pre-existing list in the Python. For example, the range. Range thing that I have just shown, it points to the already existing list in the Python. So for example, what here is going to happen, we have the range 6 is going to point to 1 2 3 4 and 5, right? Now this 4x in range this is going to assign the value, assign each element to x one by one. And what this operator is, this is basically power of operator. So if I write 2 double asterisk 10, it means 2 की power 10. Okay, so it is going to this expression is going to have each value one by one. Okay, so if so what it is going to have is it is going to assign the values to power 2 as 2 की power 0, then 2 की power 1, then 2 की power 2, then 2 की power 3, 2 की power 4 and 2 की power 5. This is how it's going to work. Another way, another example, we can take it, or we can also have a if statement. We can also have a validation statement here. So in the range 20, in the range from 0 to 19, it will take only those elements who are not divisible by 2, or basically who are odd numbers. Whichever elements are odd numbers are going to be assigned to x, and this x is going to go here, and they are going to one by one go to this list, and hence we can just print the particular result. And as we have already explained, this is the syntax of using the for loop.